All right. Welcome to week 12. I apologize we're not in person, but hopefully you can still get enough out of this recording. Otherwise, you are welcome to attend other sections. Just make sure you fill out the attendance link that's on our course page. All of the YouTube videos that will be mentioned in this recording will be also posted there. I do encourage you to watch them because a lot of them have supplemental information that could be good and it could be explained in a way that's better understood by you. Otherwise, today we're going to be talking about Pluto and a bit about the origins of life. I won't be talking as much in depth about like COVID and the HIV virus like Professor John Lowe did, but we'll go into it a little bit. So, all right, announcement wise, just remember everything is due on 4/29. Extra credit, observation projects, any late homeworks. Your homework 10 is due this Friday at 4/22. Yeah. If you have any logistical questions, feel free to email me. Just remember, any homework extensions will be going directly through the professor. So either email them directly, or if you do email me, I'll be forwarding it along to them. All right. So we're going to go through a quick review of small bodies. If you remember our structure, we are housed in this inner planet region. Outside of that is our asteroid belt. A lot of comet nuclei will come from the asteroid belt, the ones that more closely come towards Earth. From there, we have Jupiter, then Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and our Kuiper belt. This houses a bunch of other asteroids, a lot larger bodies, and then our Oort cloud, which has billions of comets that live in this area. You can look at the scale here, distance from the sun, one being the sun. The Oort cloud is fairly far away. A lot of everything's very compact within about 60 AUs of the sun. So asteroids, comets are small bodies. The smallest bodies of rock and ice are left over from the start of our solar system. Larger bodies, such like our large asteroids, these are large asteroids, large planets. These are evidence of full-blown planetary evolution. So like the planet was formed, it differentiated, it is impacted, it grew into what we know today. Asteroids are a source of most meteorites and meteors that come to Earth. The super large ones are differentiated. And remember, by differentiated, we mean it's basically separated by density. It's going to have a heavier core, typically of iron and nickel, and then the lighter elements as it goes out. The Kuiper belt, this is a lot of the smaller comet nuclei that we see. Icy moons, we actually think a lot of these are geologically active. Evidence of, if you remember from last year, the PP moon. We get cryovolcanism, so volcanoes of basically ice, methane, those smaller, those water-based materials. So those icy moons beg to question the source of water. Is it essential to life? That's a lot of what scientists are still trying to figure out. How do we create life? What does it need to form, etc. Dwarf planets are smaller planets, but don't fulfill our whole criteria of what a planet should be. So beyond Neptune, there's a large belt of icy planetesimals. We call this the Kuiper belt. It also contains a few dwarf planets, including Pluto, our friend Pluto that used to be a planet. Peace out. Scientists still kind of go back and forth on what exactly is a planet, which is why Pluto is a big of interest when it comes to this discussion. So if you remember, like me, back in middle school, maybe the beginning of high school, Pluto was a planet. There were 9. So like other icy planetary objects, the Kuiper belt contains clues to the formation and evolution of our solar system. We have recently visited 2 dwarf planets. There are a few missions that we just like send out there to go as far as they can. This is how we can get to these dwarf planets. Dwarf planets and large asteroids show remarkable evidence of planetary evolution. So they're all interest to planetary scientists, because we can look at them and be like, okay, well, how do we get from this to our full-blown planets that we live on? And it can be interesting. Pluto, it's the coolest. It is the coldest out of all of our planets. Some of the more recent missions, like we mentioned last slide, actually believe that Pluto has an like a active water ocean underneath its crust, and that there could be a lot of cool things happening in there. That's a very recent discovery, so I don't exactly know. Pluto does actually have its own small moons. Charon, Hydra, Kerberos, Nix, and Styx. Um, these are the small moons orbiting Pluto, which is surprising. We don't consider planet a Pluto. We don't consider Pluto a planet, but we still have moons orbiting it. It's pretty cool. So that's our review on small bodies and Pluto. I suggest you watch this little bit of tech talk about bacteria and antibiotics. It's a pretty cool video. Remember, I'll post these links on our page. Biggest thing we want to mention is the difference between bacteria and viruses. Let me see this. So on our biological level, which is typically how we look at bacteria and viruses, the main difference between the two is that bacteria are free living cells that can live inside or outside of a body, so they can self-sustain themselves, while viruses are a non-living collection of molecules that need a host to survive. We can use antibiotics to fight bacteria, but we can't use it to fight viruses. That's the big thing there. Come on, slides. Even technology gets me in recordings. All right, so now we're going to start talking about a bit about the origins of life. I suggest you also watch this video, and we'll kind of discuss it in the following slides as we go through. So we have fossil evidence of life going back to 2.5 to 3.5 billion years ago. This usually comes through bacteria, stromatolites, and we also have indirect evidence. So it's not like super accurate. That can go back even farther, about 4 billion years, which is in the first 10% of Earth's history. Later on, I suggest you watch a video on stromatolites, which talk about this. So to really understand what life is to us, we need to kind of look at the genetic processes of evolution. And this is important in many other areas besides astronomy. Astrobiology is a really big field, trying to go through this part, but also in immunology, medical, biotechnology, public health and law, so policymakers, forensics, so those crime fighters on TV shows you see. Forensics labs can really look at these. Life as we know on Earth is sustained and really associated with water, but we're not 100% sure that water is actually needed in order for life to survive. So it could not be a requirement on other planets. We have found building blocks of life in meteorites and other places of space. Typically, these are the amino acids and organic molecules that we use to survive. If you remember the discussion on the Miller-Urey experiment, that was really big, and they created amino acids out of just basic organic molecules, which was pretty cool. So life can form very quickly. And we think that bacteria is a good evidence of life evolution, mostly because it can live and reproduce on itself, and viruses can't. So the missing link that we have that scientists want to figure out is how do we get from this organic chemistry, such as viruses or methane, to biology, like basically how life is surviving for bacteria, humans, animals, etc. So our best understanding goes like this on the evolution of life. Life originates approximately 4 to 4.5 billion years ago. We go from an RNA to a DNA world about 3 to 4 billion years ago. Prokaryotes starts forming, so these have cell nucleus. How do these form into eukaryotes? This happened about 1 to 2 billion years ago, and about 1 to 3 billion years ago, we have the great oxygenation event. And this is like cyanobacteria actually forming and causing all this oxygen to release into the atmosphere. There's also the outgassing. So like we know Earth is differentiated, all that light stuff wanted to leave. So that includes oxygen, nitrogen, CO2, the things we need to breathe. Life on Earth was nurtured by volcanoes in the sun, modified by impacts and mutations. A bit more in detail, RNA is basically single-stranded DNA. If you like biology, you know that. You can store genetic information and catalyze reactions associated with primitive life forms. if this great oxygen boom that I mentioned, created by cyanobacteria, didn't happen, our life currently would not be able to exist. So that big oxygen boom coming from that is a large catalyst to life. So back to this question of, is water essential for life? We're not sure. It seems necessary for life as we know it, but for all we know, there could be alien life out there that survives on what? Rocks. Maybe they survive on magnesium. But water works well as a medium for chemical reactions and molecular assembly among relevant molecules. It has relevant properties. So dielectric constant, basically, it's a universal solvent. We can dissolve almost anything in water. And it's widely available in a lot of the planets we're looking at and on Earth. One of the big things that scientists look at is our idea of a habitable zone. So the zone that Earth is in is just far enough away from the sun that liquid water can form, and that the temperature is nice for humans to live. But it's now becoming a question on whether or not the habitable zone as we know it is actually correct. That there is maybe other solar systems where this habitable zone is either farther away or closer to their star, depending on how their life forms. But biggest thing, liquid water exists well out of our habitable zone, so that also creates a question. Scientists, mostly biologists, oceanographers, when we're talking about the origin of life, we like to track it back through this use of the tree of life. We have three domains: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Bacteria is our prokaryote, and archaea and eukarya are eukaryotes. And these are based on how cells are. This tree of life shows a relationship between genomes of different organisms and how we can closely or distantly relate them, or how long it took for them to evolve. So like if we discover a new type of dinosaur or some sort of fossil of an animal that we haven't seen before, we'll often look for its most common ancestor and how far back that formed and try to get at how old this fossil is. Plants and animals are within a small part of eukarya. You can see it way over here. Bacteria and archaea. Oh, sorry, I mentioned it wrong before. Bacteria and archaea are prokaryotes, and eukarya are eukaryotes. So these two are prokaryotes, and this is our eukaryotes. Cool. These have a simple cell. So no nucleus. But these have a nucleus. Yay. All right. So life on Earth is bacteria dominant over geologic time and our species diversity, and is significant by mass. So this begs the question, what do we expect elsewhere? Because life as we know is mostly microbial. When we look for life elsewhere, we're also looking for things like bacteria, because this is our main understanding of how life began. It's from these microbes and from bacteria. So you might have seen it on another slide, but we call this impact frustration of life. Impacts can cause major extinctions. We know this by the big comet that killed all the dinosaurs. The guy who came up with that and won the Nobel Peace Prize for it is actually finds his home in our Earth and Planetary Sciences Department. So you might, I don't know how often he comes in, but every once in a while he'll be around our department walking around. We think that life actually likely started way before 4 billion years ago. There are a lot of circumstances that make it whether or not we can find that this life exists. Early Earth, if you remember talking about how Earth formed, it's very high rate of impacts. We also have very large impacts. So we know from Earth's geologic fossil timeline that there were at least 2 major extinction events. But we actually think that life was probably wiped out several times, more than what we've actually found. So the question is, therefore, is life actually easy to get started? So kind of going back to the stages of the development of life, we mentioned it a little bit before. So we need prebiotic chemistry, so our basic building blocks for life: amino acids, methane, liquid water. We need our primitive biotic chemistry, so the ability to self-assemble, like our bacteria, microbes, cyanobacteria. Then we can develop into an RNA world, so we can get replication based on RNA. Then we can evolve a little bit of further and get our DNA and protein world, which is what we need to survive. We need our DNA. And that's what we need in our modern world today. Or that's what we have in our modern world today is DNA and protein. So we're in that. We're in stage number 4. Like I mentioned before, the video on stalagmites. This is a really cool video, super short. So the link will be posted. I suggest you go and watch it. This one is optional if you want to watch it. I think it's a very fun video. If you have any questions on topics, you might want to watch this if you have the time to see if it'll help you at all. So now we're going to walk through a bit some of the true and false questions mentioned in lecture to make sure we can get some of these points across. You'll notice that homework 10 has a lot more true and false. We tried to structure the homework 10 as if it were an exam or helping you study for the final. That's why it has a lot more content spreading rather than just this third section. It has things from across the whole semester. So use it a little bit like a study guide. All right, so go ahead and try these. You can go ahead and pause and try them, and then we'll walk through the answer. All right, so the first one, chemical molecules can undergo evolution. True or false? It is true. They can. We see this. We see this through bacteria becoming RNA, becoming DNA, etc. Those are all essentially chemical molecules. All right, number 2. The difference between viruses and bacteria represents our missing link between chemistry and biology. This is also true. So the big question is, how do we get from viruses to bacteria? Life needs oxygen to survive. This is false because there are microbes and bacteria that don't need oxygen to survive. It's common in our day-to-day, in the present. We'll go with that one. All right. Now, microorganisms are the most common and diverse forms of life on Earth. That is true. The number of microorganisms and their diversity outweighs what we see on the surface of Earth. And I believe those are the types of organisms that tend to survive large extinction events. All right, some more. I'll go ahead and pause and let you guys do a little bit more true and false, and then we'll go through them. All right, so alcohols, amino acids, fats, sugars have all been found in meteorites. That is true. It is very true. Nanofossils have been found in meteorites. True or false? That is false. There was a claim about nanofossils being found in meteorites, but it wasn't supported by our scientific method. It's currently not confirmed, but that doesn't mean we won't ever find them. It's just currently we haven't found them. True or false? Molecules of non-human biological origin have been found in space. That is also false. We haven't found molecules that have a biological influence in ways that we can recognize. But again, we may in the future. That's one of the cool things about science. It's all ever changing. We're finding new information. The last one, soot molecules, or PAH, in space form chlorophyll-like molecules under stellar UV electron radiation. This is true. No need for you to memorize this one. It's just kind of like a cool fact. All right, so now we have our question. So select all that apply. What are eukaryotes? So which one of these are true? Go ahead and pause and figure it out. All right, so the answer is E. All of them do. Eukaryotes are cells that contain a nucleus. They're ancient and have a younger origin. Though they're ancient, they have a younger origin than prokaryotes. Prokaryotes are like the example of viruses going to bacteria. There are non-living ones. They may have developed from prokaryotes by eating or being infected by bacteria and viruses. And they include most all visible life by naked eye. So all the above. Now, what about bacteria and viruses? Go ahead and pause and figure it out. All right, the answer is C. They can cause disease, but also play essential roles in humans and other organisms. Sorry, my cat just like jumped from my chair, even though I didn't see it. The other facts are false. So viruses, which one is true? The smallest bottle. I'll go ahead and pause and figure it out. The answer is big chemical molecules. They're not hazardous. They're hazardous to other animals. They do have genetic information. They are able to develop. They aren't able to develop and reproduce on their own. Remember, they need a host, and they're not the smallest of biological organisms. All right, remember the tree of life. Select the true statement. All right, our answer is B. The tree of life is not the oldest living organism, but it does help us track organisms. It relates organisms based on the characteristics of their genomes. That is true. It was not created by modern biotechnology because it's not an organism. It doesn't show how humans are more similar to bacteria than to plants. That was not the purpose of it. All right, so those are good questions for you to be able to figure out. And that is the end of what I have for you guys today. The last things I want to talk about is please fill out your course evaluations. If you didn't agree with anything in the lecture discussion section or how it was done, how you think it can improve, please say so. Help us make the class better for others in the future. And if you're interested in this type of research, talk to either your GSIs or especially the professors. The professors might be able to help you out a little more. And we can help get you in touch with people that may be doing research you're interested in, potential internships, or you never know, you might look out and do undergrad research with one of the professors. All right, make sure you fill out your attendance. Otherwise, I will see you next week. We will be in person. Thanks for stopping by.